You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's another beautiful evening here at here on the back porch at the ranch, and it's a nice evening. The dogs are out here with me. They're sleeping. They're doing what dogs do. They're either barking or they're sleeping. I guess that's the way that works. Michael Murphy, Voice of Reason, Lanterns Radio Network, lanterns.buzz. We're glad to have you with us. I'm glad you take the time to come and listen to what we have to say. And I hope you'll take the advantage of going over there and looking online, either through Spreaker, iHeartRadio, YouTube, lanterns.buzz. There's lots of places you can find us. And we've got some good broadcasters, some good shows on the radio side, also some excellent writers, and lots of good stuff over there at lanterns.buzz. I do a little of both. And I like to talk, so they said, hey, you need to do this. And while I'm thinking about it, this has always been a podcast. Since I've been doing this for Lanterns, it's always been a podcast. And they've approached me about doing this live. And so starting next week, this show will be live. And so I don't know that you'll really notice a difference. We had a few shows where they had an editor, and I wasn't really honestly, just wasn't very happy with the editing. And I said, if I was doing it live, there'd be no editing. They said, well, that's true. So here we are. You're going to get what you get, and whether it's a podcast or live, you're going to hear what you hear. Maybe you'll hear a dog bark. Maybe you'll hear a rooster crow or a donkey bray or something. We'll just kind of take it in stride. Anyway, starting next week, the show will be live, and I guess the nice thing about live is if I want to have a guest or maybe have a way for people to call in, we'll be able to do that as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. Several things going on in the world. Obviously, North Korea has sucked all the oxygen out of the room, so to speak, and we're gonna get to that here shortly. I wanted to do a little bit of an update. I've mentioned the couple, Amy Fabbrini and Eric Zeigler up in Oregon, and their fight for their two sons. One has been out of the home for 4 years. The other one was born, I believe, in February and was taken from the hospital by Child Protective Services. As a reminder, you can go online and look. I've written some articles. There's been other broadcasters have covered this. There's been other articles written. It's out there. Just briefly, the family has been determined by CPS to be not intelligent enough, not a high enough IQ, to be able to raise their children. I've read some things. There's things that just don't really pass the smell test. Amy's father does not seem supportive of his daughter, and I'm not sure why. CPS says on one hand, we're working to get the kids back with their parents where they belong, and yet there's documents and witnesses that say that the agent or care worker in charge has stated that there's no way that they're going to allow these children ever going to go back there. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense either. So hopefully there's some investigations going on. I did a video on it. I hope you'll go check out my YouTube channel, Voice of Reason, and subscribe to it if you haven't. I do 1 or 2 videos a week, usually on some news bit. Sometimes I do something funny, so you never know what you're going to get there. Take a look at that anyway, and I talk a little bit about this situation. There's investigations that are going on. Glenn Beck and the Blaze have been looking into this, and they're not really liking what they're finding. And then the organization that helped with the Justina Peltier in Boston here a few years ago, you may recall that young lady suffered another rare condition, and her parents and doctors were doing things that seemed to be working fairly well for her. And she had a little bit of an emergency one time, and they took her to the hospital, and the hospital just took over, and the hospital would not release the child, and they had to go to court, and it was a long, drawn-out process. Bottom line is that the things that the hospital did really took Justina downhill, and she has never recovered to the point she was before she went to the hospital, and that's a real tragedy. And the bottom line is we've got situations in this country. We're supposed to have this is supposed to be the land of opportunity, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and all that. Until somebody decides that you don't know what you're doing, and then all of a sudden you've lost everything. And when you have organizations isn't the right word, when you have agencies of the government, whether they be local, state, or federal, when they can come in and deny you without due process, this is another situation where they take these children, and then you have to prove that they didn't have any right to take the children. And people will say, well, we need to err on the side of the children. We need to do what's best for the children. Well, what's really best for the child? This older child is 4 years old, and he hasn't been with his mother for 4 years. He doesn't even know her. He's not had visitation rights or anything like that, and so this is a terrible thing. And so now this family is trying to adopt him. And what's going to happen to this situation if Amy's allowed to have her child back? So when the government gets involved, there's lots of times they screw things up. And I'm going to tell you right here, full disclosure, my wife and I were foster parents in the state of Texas. We were registered with the state. We lived in Childress, Texas at the time, and so we took in kids from all in that part, in the southern part of the Panhandle, and off down in North Texas, off towards the Wichita Falls area, and all. And we took kids in. We had some kids we had for a long time. There's one child we had actually for about 2 years. There's others that we had, and actually our oldest daughter we adopted from that program. My wife and I always thought that we would get, when we got married, she had been widowed and she had a son and a daughter, and we thought, well, we'll have a child, and then whatever sex we don't have, we'll fill it in, and we'll have 2 of each. And we always thought that once our son was born, that we would adopt a little girl, and that when our family would complete. Well, the little girl we adopted was 16 at the time, so when she came to live with us. So maybe things don't always work out the way you plan, but the point I'm trying to make is I understand that there are bad people out there. There are bad parents, and they don't need to be having their kids because the kids are in danger with these parents. There's no doubt about that. But we also have to understand is that people make mistakes. And sometimes CPS gets involved in a situation where maybe somebody is just mad at somebody, and they call CPS and say, hey, you need to check this out over here, and so then CPS, they don't know any better, and so they have to take it as if it's really a problem. So we don't ever really know what's going on in these things until you really get down in the weeds and can really look at it. But this isn't really looking very favorable towards the way CPS has been behaving in this particular situation, but I'm going to hold off on casting complete judgment because I don't have all the facts. All I have is just whatever I read in the paper, so to speak, as Barack Obama would say. So anyway, we're gonna move on from that. But I'd like you to go check out that video anyway. And I maybe sometimes when you see somebody speaking, maybe you get the point across a little bit better. Anyway, enough on that. We're going to look at North Korea. We're going to spend some time on this North Korea deal. I see it. I don't know. Trump and his Twitter thing. Number one, I'm going to tell you right here. I've got Twitter. I tweet, but my tweets are primarily tied to Facebook. When I post on Facebook, it automatically tweets. I don't really understand Twitter. I'll tell you that right up front. And when I've looked at it, I go, I don't get it. I don't know why people like to do this. Okay, but because this is a business and because of the way we're trying to get information out there and everything, Twitter is part of it, and so I tweet. But the idea of just going out and just tweeting these little things, I don't do this on Facebook either. I don't go on Facebook and spout some little thing. I did it one time for a short time in my Facebook career, and it's counterproductive. It just doesn't really serve any purposes. I don't know why a president, well, I don't know why. A president can say, I have an announcement to make, and I'm going to make that announcement here very, very, at 8 o'clock tonight. That's the way they've always done it historically. They don't just, at 2 o'clock in the morning send a tweet out. And so these are the sorts of things that really kind of get me. And I just don't, it just really bothers me the way this stuff goes on. And so now you've got Trump tweeting this and that stuff back and forth, and you've got Kim Jong-un over there saying, oh, yeah, well, I'm going to up the ante over here. This is not the way to do this is not the way to do our international policy, I don't think. But the bottom line is we have what we have, and I know Trump is not going to suddenly stop tweeting just because I don't like it and because I think it's childish. So he says he's going to rain if Kim Jong-un doesn't stop this rhetoric and everything, he's going to rain fire and fury and destruction on North Korea. And I look at this, and I'm seeing people from both sides of this. People saying, that's insanity. You don't just, because they're of their rhetoric or because maybe they have stuff. I remember not long ago, remember the little saying, Bush lied and people died? Well, that wasn't really true. Bush didn't lie, but the idea was over. If all the intelligence showed that Saddam Hussein had chemical weapons and that he was likely to use them. Well, now, if you think about it, that served Saddam Hussein's purposes, because if everybody thinks he's got it, maybe they're going to leave him alone, because you don't want to get mustard gas or cyanide or anthrax or whatever they might throw at you. So you sort of like, it's kind of like, it's like the next best thing to a nuclear weapon, so people leave you alone. This could be a similar thing here. We don't know. Do they have 60 weapons? Do they have 6? Do they have 600? We don't know. I read a statement by a fellow earlier today. He says, we don't really have anything to worry about. These guys are morons. They don't have any technology. They're basically their intercontinental ballistic missiles are bottle rockets, and they don't have an entry vehicle. And so therefore, it doesn't really matter. They can send whatever they can fire something our way if they want, and it's just going to burn up on entry. Well, now, if you're trying to blow something up on the ground, that's true, and that's a real important part. And there are a lot of the intelligence says that they probably do not have a very good entry vehicle. It looks like maybe one of the last tests that they did, that the entry vehicle broke up on re-entry. So, but we don't know, did it break up because it was detonated? We don't really know. But I want you to think about something. What is one of the things that we really probably fear the most in this country, and you've heard about it a lot in the last number of years, is an EMP. Well, an EMP, and I looked this up before I went on air because I wanted to make sure I could speak about it, with a little bit of intelligence. An EMP is a nuclear detonation that is done above the ground. and not just a little bit above the ground. It's 40 to 400 kilometers above the ground. And for those of you who are not in England, that's about between 25 and 250 miles above the ground. That's way up there, boys and girls. And so the reentry vehicle is sort of a non-issue because you're blowing it up before that becomes an issue. It's not going to generate the heat up there. If they blow that thing up a couple hundred miles above the surface, that's going to cover a huge territory, and the electromagnetic pulse will likely destroy everything that's not inside of a Faraday cage. So we have to understand that it's a real danger. Do I think it's going to happen tomorrow? No. But you know what? If it happens tomorrow, I'll figure it out, and I think I'll make it. I'm not going to like it. You won't hear from me. Like I said, next week I'm going to be live. If there's an EMP goes off tomorrow, you can cancel that. I won't be live next week, okay? But there's a real problem over there. There certainly is. I don't know if Kim Jong-un is evil or if he's crazy or a little of both. We have to look at the situation. We have to look at a little bit of history. And I'm going to take a little bit of a break here. It's time for my first break. I'm going to take a short break here, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the history of Kim Jong-un and kind of what's going on over there. So bear with me, and we'll be back shortly. All right, thanks for staying with me, and we're back here. We were talking about North Korea and the potential for an EMP. Just going back, just briefly before I move ahead with this subject, I want to talk just a little bit about being prepared. And you know, there's preppers. Everybody talks about being ready for this, that, and the other. And the bottom line is there's no way any of us are ever going to be completely prepared for every possible scenario. I think the best thing to do is just sort of be prepared for anything. You're not going to be fully prepared for anything, and there's going to be quite an adaptation that's going to have to take place. Some of us will have a very difficult time if we have medical issues. If you need medicine, treatments, those things aren't going to happen. And we just have to face the fact there's going to be a lot of people that in those situations are just going to die. Now, it depends on the scenario. It depends on what happens. It doesn't have to be an EMP. You realize we've got the solar eclipse coming up soon, and everybody's getting their glasses and stuff like that so they can watch the solar eclipse. Where I am in Kansas, we're not going to have a total. I think we're going to be about 90%. I've seen total solar eclipses, and it's pretty cool. But I'm not going to drive up to wherever in its totality because you'll be able to watch it on the internet, right? So, anyway, the thing is solar flares come off of the and solar storms have been come off the sun all the time. And I can't recall exactly when it was. It's been about a year ago. There was a solar flare that shot a bunch of gamma rays off out into space that the Earth's orbit was in the wrong place. It shot off over, away from us, 90 degrees, 110 degrees away from us. And so it didn't affect us at all. But from what I read had the Earth been in the path of that blast of gamma rays and radiation was it probably would have fried everything on the face of the earth as far as electronics are concerned. Now you think about that. An EMP does a similar thing. But what if one morning you woke up or just right in the middle of the day, you're not going to know when this happens. You're not going to like see a flash of light or anything like that. Now an EMP you probably will. But a solar flare, it's just going to be a matter of one, all of a sudden electricity's off. Now I live in the country and our power goes off not regularly. It's better than it used to be. But we had some storms coming through around here yesterday. And the power went off about 3 times. It was only off for maybe 5 seconds each time, but the power went off. Now, we've had an ice storm here one time where our power was off for 2 weeks. What do you do when your power is off for 2 weeks? You adapt. You know what? Didn't have internet. Okay. Cell phones didn't work. Okay. You know, the world existed before the internet and cell phones. And so we just did what we needed to do to survive. We adapted. We got water. We got water. It was cold. It was wintertime, obviously. Things were frozen. Had to haul water for animals so that they were able to drink. We did what we had to do. And I guess that's what I'm saying is I think preparation is a mindset as much as anything. I'm prepared to. If tomorrow the electricity goes off, I'm prepared just to deal with it. I've got generators, but you know what? Generators use a lot of fuel. And you're not going to be able to run generators for a very long time. You might run them, for a little while. But my wife and I have discussed it. For instance, we've got a lot of meat in the freezer. If something like that happens, we'll start cooking and drying and doing whatever we have to things so that we can put them away or we can can them. And for long-term storage. So there's things, like I said, it's a mindset. By the way, we cook with gas. So if the power goes off, my gas stove will still work. Anyway, back to North Korea. Brian Williams the other day, he's on MSNBC now, I guess. I didn't even realize that till I saw this article. Brian Williams believes it's his job to... let's see, how is it he put it? Brian Williams believes it's his job to scare people to death over North Korea. Excuse me? Your job, Brian, I guess if you want to be a commentator, you can say whatever you want, but if you're going to be a newsman, your job is to deliver the news. And when you scare people, what you're doing is you're making something out of nothing. If I scare you, like if I jump out, okay, you're walking along in the dark and I jump out from around the corner and go, boo, I scared you. Well, what'd I do? I made something out of nothing. I made you think that there was something to be afraid of when there wasn't. And I think to a large extent, that's what the media is doing. The media is pumping this up, and they're going back and forth, and they're making this a bigger deal than what it really is. And I don't know if you can hear that thunder, but we've got some rain coming our way. So anyway, if you hear a rumble of thunder, that's the way it is. I'm going to look at the radar here real quick while I'm talking to you and see what's going on. Anyway, North Korea is certainly a bad situation, and part of the thing is how many Americans you think could go over there and go undercover and could assimilate into the country and be a spy? Obviously, with the difference in appearance, there's not many. Obviously, there are Korean Americans, and maybe somebody could get in, and maybe we do have people in there. I have no idea, and it's a good thing I don't know, because then nobody else knows. I think it's smart if we have people in there and if we're getting some direct intelligence, but who knows? The bottom line is maybe we need the truth. Maybe we don't need to be scared. Maybe we need to have the truth delivered to us. Things don't need to be made out to be something that they aren't, and people don't need to be losing sleep over something. I do not lose sleep over North Korea. I realize that something bad could happen. God forbid that Donald Trump has said while he was back in like 1999, he said if he was president that he would make some kind of a surgical strike. He is president now, and he has said that's not off the table. And so I don't know. Will he try to make some kind of surgical strike and take out either Kim Jong-un or the nuclear weapons or whatever like that? I don't know what he's going to do. If he does, will North Korea respond in kind, with at the very least with a barrage of rockets into South Korea and into Seoul, and kill thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even millions of people? Those are all possibilities. And we have to understand what's going to happen to our economy if something like that happens. I pray that cooler heads prevail, and that Donald Trump doesn't do something like that. I pray that Kim Jong-un is just bluffing, and that he either doesn't have the nuclear weapons, or if he has them, he won't use them. I take a little bit of a different look at some of these countries and stuff, and I know a lot of people will disagree with me, and hey, it's a free country and you're welcome to disagree with me, but I sometimes wonder, who are we to say who can have something and who cannot? It's sort of like me deciding that my neighbor across the street would go a little crazy if he had any guns, and so I don't want him to have guns, and so I'm going to do whatever I can to prevent him from having guns, and because I don't want him to go crazy and go shooting up the neighborhood. So, and it's kind of like that. Now I understand that because some of these countries have a record and all like that. I understand that, but I'm not a fan of Teddy Roosevelt. But I am a fan of his saying of speak softly and carry a big stick. When we go around bluffing, when we go around spouting off that we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and you better not step over this line or we're going to do something about it, that lots of times just encourages something. We've got a reputation in this country now of just backing off, of speaking and blustering and everything like that, and then not doing anything. And so that's an encouragement to people who want to do something like that, to just to do these things. And I think that, if North Korea has nukes, that's not a good thing. And if they've got nukes, it's largely because we gave them nukes. I remember Bill Clinton giving them a couple of reactors and things like that. So, but the bottom line is it's a big world. They could have gotten that stuff from Iran. They could have gotten it from Russia, any number of places. And so it's not just from us. So the bottom line is when we've got a situation like this, I would wonder if we're not just better off to say, you know what, and we may have to have a record of doing these sorts of things. I would say, you know what, I don't really care what you do over there. You're a crap dictator who ruins people's lives, and you're starving your people to death. But you know what, they need to rise up and overthrow you if that's a problem. And I'm not going to mess with you. I really don't give a crap about you. You're not worth my spending 2 cents worth of time on. But I'll tell you what, if you do something, we will melt you into the earth. Now, probably what's going to have to happen is somebody's going to try that. And I would do the same thing. I've said it all along. I would do the same thing with ISIS and all of them. I would tell them, you know what? You think Mecca is an important place? Well, that place is going to be glass and so radioactive that nobody can go there for 1,000 years. So if you feel froggy, jump. If you want to go around killing people and everything like that, you kill people over there. You come over here and kill people, we're going after you. And that's it. And it'll be your fault that it happened. That's what they believe. That's how they operate, because that's what they do to us, isn't it? And so these are the sorts of things that kind of come to mind to me, and I don't know. I'm probably a little crazy, and I haven't thought through all of it and everything completely. But anyway, it's time. It's halfway through the show, and it's time for me to take a break. And I'm going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with you here in just a little while.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Okay, thanks for staying with us. I took a look at the radar during that break, and there's a pretty nasty storm bearing down on us. And so if I have to bail out of here in a little bit and put this on pause and all like that, I'll do it. But anyway, yeah, I'm probably a little crazy about the way I would handle some of these things, but I've got to face the fact too that there's an awful lot of people that have tried a lot of different things that have never worked, and so I just have always felt like the idea of you don't mess with me, you don't mess with America. We're not going to, and part of the problem is we go everywhere and we screw everything up, and we mess with people all the time. If we had a reputation of leaving people alone, kind of like what we did in relation to the Barbary pirates, we tried to appease them. It wasn't working. It just was getting out of hand. And Jefferson said, "You know what? That's enough of this garbage. We're taking care of this." And they went in there and they wiped them out. And you know what? We didn't have any problem with them for years and years and years. And that's what that is. You have to take it to them. You wipe them out. And you know what? We didn't go in there and build roads and bridges and schools and post offices and grocery stores for them. We wiped them out and we came home. And that's our problem. We think we've got to go in there and win hearts and minds. No, you go in there, the army, the military is to kill people and break things, and that's it. And that's what they should be used for. So, okay, enough of that. We're going to go on to something else. I published a couple of articles today, and we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about these two articles. I did one called "Everybody Loves a Tyrant," and that's a saying that I've said for a long time. And you say, everybody loves a tyrant. No, not everybody loves a tyrant. And I said, well, it does have a qualifying statement. Everyone loves a tyrant as long as it's their tyrant. And that's a real situation. I'll tell you what. And the reason, what brought me to this article was something I saw that was making a comparison between Obama and Trump. And it's a comparison I'd seen, but I had not seen the research, so it was interesting seeing research with it. But I hope you'll go check out this article. But I'm going to kind of go through it a little bit here. But my feelings about this stem primarily from just observing people and how they react to certain leaders. And I've talked about this in the past, and I've written about it in the past, about how people will excoriate one person for doing or saying something. And then when somebody they like says or does the same thing, it's okay. They get a pass. And we saw that was very clear to me when George Bush was president. People railed on him for being unconstitutional and executive orders and all sorts of problems and everything like that. By the way, I did too, because I didn't like some of the stuff that he did. And as well as Congress, doing things outside the Constitution and violating our rights. But when Barack Obama became president, all those people that were complaining about Bush suddenly thought Obama hung the moon and that he was wonderful. And then as soon as Trump got in, they're back flip-flopping over again. But I've noticed it's not just progressives that are that way. So-called conservatives are the exact same way. I've watched them rail on Barack Obama for 8 years. And then suddenly, here comes Donald Trump, and he's doing some of the exact same stuff and saying some of the exact same things, and he gets a pass. So this article, I said what I did is I went back. I said the Israelites of the Bible. You may recall when they were using the judges, Samuel they asked Samuel, said, "We want a king." And so Samuel prayed to God and talked to God, and God says, if they get if they don't want a king, because a king's going to tax them, he's going to make them do things they don't want to do. He's going to get them into wars. Going to have all these problems and everything like that come with getting a king. No, you don't want a king. And so Samuel went and told the people, and the people go, "We don't care. We want a king." So they got a king. And guess what? Everything they were warned about happened. But you know what? They didn't complain about it because it was their tyrant. Now, you think about that. Now, as we go on in here like that, I think back in the time, I remember I was living in Topeka, Kansas. My dad was in the military and based at Forbes there. And that was when the Nixon JFK campaign went on, presidential race. I remember, I was fairly young, but I remember the rhetoric, and I remember things being very, very divided. I remember this country was quite divided over a Kennedy versus a Nixon. Of course, Nixon had been Eisenhower's vice president, and so people kind of knew him. And then here comes this new good-looking guy, Camelot, and all this stuff. And of course, we also have to understand now that JFK today would be a very conservative Republican in his policies. I don't know if he would like where the country's gone or not. He may have evolved along with everybody else. His brother certainly did. But anyway, I stated in the article, I said, I expect people to get mad at me because I watched the deal. If I say anything good about Trump, I've got people coming after me about saying, he's awful. I can't believe you're saying that. And if I say anything bad about him, then I got the other side coming after me. And so I'm prepared to have everybody mad at me after this article. But I'm not an apologist for the Republican Party. And I'm not here to stand up for, and I don't care. I was a Ted Cruz supporter. Obviously, he didn't make it. Whatever. The bottom line was, we got what we got. And what my thing is the Constitution. My thing is the Republic. And Ted Cruz did and said some things that I didn't really like. So it's not that I've got to have somebody that I agree with 100% of the time, or that my guy has to be there all the time, but I also need to be able to be critical of my guy. And if I can't, then we've got a real problem. Anyway, the bottom line is that I'm trying to get people to open their eyes and start using reality and facts, but we tend to use feelings a little too much. When I looked at this information here, this data, I said, our leaders are a reflection of who we are as a people in a society. While Barack Obama and Donald Trump have distinctly different styles and demeanors, they're both clearly narcissists. Now, a certain amount of narcissism in a leader is kind of a good thing, because you want somebody who's sure of themselves and believes that they're the only one that can solve the problem. But a good leader also understands that they don't have all the answers and are willing to listen to other people. I don't really know how either one of those men were in the boardroom, so to speak, or in the cabinet room when there were other people in there talking and giving ideas. The bottom line is they come across as being, clearly narcissists, and that's primarily because you can just look at their speeches and the first-person pronouns they use. The research that was done, what they did is they went in and they looked at campaign speeches and they looked at speeches that were done, in office. I think primarily with Obama they looked at in office, but since Trump had only been in office about 6 months, they looked at his campaign speeches and they looked at it since then. And the speeches had to be at least 500 words long, so tweets weren't included in this. This was something where he actually sat down and spoke and said something on a topic. Looking at these, they call it the self-referential rhetoric, Obama, and what they did is they went back and they looked at the presidents, the post-war presidents from FDR on, and of course, that's kind of FDR used the radio quite a bit, and so there's quite a bit of data there for presidents FDR on. Beyond that, not so much. So but looking back all the way to FDR, Obama used the pronouns like me, my, I, those things like that, 69% more than the average president. 69% more. And guess what? Donald Trump uses it 20% more than Obama. Now, I can remember during Obama's presidency, people going out and saying, oh, all you can ever do is say, I, me, my. Well, Donald Trump does it too, but I don't hear them calling on that. Well, because he's their tyrant. They like him. Tenacious rhetoric was another comparison. Obama exceeds the average, and tenacious rhetoric was, in other words, the way you're using stuff, becoming, I can't give you an example. Just an example's not coming to mind. But anyway, tenacious rhetoric was another comparison. In the article I wrote, I did link this research, so you can go in there and look at it and read the research. I think it's pretty interesting. Anyway, Obama exceeded the average by 45%, and Trump was slightly above that. And they've got a grid there, and they've got in a graph, and it's pretty graphic, if you pardon the pun, in relation to the differences. I wrote an article last February, and I linked it in this article. Once again, this article was Everybody Loves a Tyrant as Long as They're Tyrant. So if you'll go to lanterns.buzz, you can find this article and then links to the research and also links to the previous article that I wrote. Our republic was founded on principles of self-reliance, personal responsibility, and virtues. This thing that we've become, this sparring on Facebook, making inflammatory posts and waiting for people to respond and reply, and then saying, I got several people unfriended me because of that one, or I had to block so-and-so because they got crazy with their responses and stuff like that. That does nothing. What does that do? Honestly, what's that doing for you? What's it doing for the country? I'd say it's negative. It isn't positive. But all this blocking, unfriending, slinging insults and rants and feeds, everything like that, it just dragged us down to the abyss. It's kind of like the old saying about wrestling with pigs. It only gets you muddy, and the pig likes it. You know, the bottom line is we've got situations in this country that need help, and this is not helping. When you look at and when I mention virtues, a lot of people say, "Oh, there you go, Bible thumpers and all like that." They're out there talking about their virtues, about how you got to be squeaky clean, and everything. I specifically use the virtues that Benjamin Franklin spoke of. Benjamin Franklin had 13 virtues, and he took those virtues seriously. He wrote them down. He made a little card. And he was able to put a checkbook by each one, a check mark by each one, so that as he went through the day, he would look at it in the morning to remind him, and in the evening he would check off, did I do those things? And I think that we would do well to do some of those things. It was not the sort of things, as far as virtue is concerned, as what we might think. I'm not sure if my internet's going to work here with this storm coming up here. But here's the list of virtues, and then I'm going to move on to another subject. Temperance, in other words, eat not to dullness, drink not to elevation. So in other words, don't eat like a pig, and don't drink till you're oblivious. Okay. Silence. Speak not but what may benefit others or yourself. Order. Let your things have their places, and let each part of your business have its time. Resolution, frugality, industry, sincerity, justice, moderation, cleanliness, tranquility, chastity, humility. These are the sorts of things that our founders worried about and in their own lives. And do we do this? We used to teach our children this. Do our children being taught this anymore in the home? They're certainly not being taught it in the schools. So we've got situations here where my point with all this, And the name of that article was "A Bridge Too Far," and it was a two-part article, and this was from part one. And I hope you'll go back in here and look at that. It was from last February 1st on lanterns.buzz. But we have some problems in this country with, and this is where my next article's going. And so maybe what I'm going to do, it's time for a short break. I'm going to take a short break here, and then we will pick back up on some of this and take it from there. Well, I'm back with you. I'm looking at the radar here. This storm's kind of bearing down on me here. It's getting actually fairly close, so I may or may not get finished up here before this thing hits. And if I lose power or something, that may create a little bit of a problem, but we'll take that as it comes. Anyway, back to this deal. We were looking at this article in relation to the presidents, and what I want to go to here the last little bit is an article I wrote called "The Fruits of Self-Gratification." And I think both these articles kind of go hand in hand. I wrote one of them last night and the other one this morning. And what I did is I took a comparison. We have a tendency here in this country. We all strive to be middle class. Now, we'd like to maybe be, a little bit above that. But the bottom line is I remember my wife asked me, she says, "Well, what are your goals? What do you hope for as far as, what kind of thing?" This is when we were first dating. And I mean, we were not just dating, we were engaged, but we weren't married yet. And I remember telling her, I said, "I want to make enough that you can stay at home with the children while they're in school. Once they're grown and gone, that's fine if you want to get a job or anything like that. But I think kids need to be raised by their mother. I'm old-fashioned, and that's just that way." Well, she was old-fashioned too, and that was what she wanted. And so that's what she did. And when our youngest got up into about middle school, she began taking some training and doing some volunteer work, and ultimately went into EMS and spent 21 years working in EMS, and she's now retired from that. So she was able to have a career, but she was also able to be a mother to our children, which I think is very important. But that's not so much the case anymore. And that's, of course, the women's lib, they look down on that. You shouldn't want to be a mother. You should want to have a career. So I tried to take a look at the typical average middle-class family. They've got a house. They've both got a car, got a couple of kids. Maybe they've got a camper or a boat or something like that so they can do some stuff with the family. Because mom works, they go out to eat maybe a little bit more frequently because it's a little harder to, or maybe they pick stuff up on the way home, to have for supper. So the bottom line is they use up a lot by the time they've got, and of course with the increase in medical expenses and insurance due to Obamacare and everything, a lot of that extra money is not there. We used to have a little bit extra money, left over. We put money in savings and everything, but there's a lot of families now that pretty well eat up all of their money every month, and there's no savings. Well, you know what? Our economy is built on that. Our economy encourages that. What do they talk about? How do they measure our economy? They measure it with GDP. What's that? That's buying stuff. That's how much stuff is bought and sold. So that's how they determine it. Back in the day, there was an encouragement to be a good steward, to not live to excess. Like I said, in the virtues, there was the idea that we were to go out and save for our future, save for a rainy day, and now, hey, we've got credit cards for that. Well, let's see how that's working out for us. Pew Research did quite a bit of a look at this, and I referenced several places in this article, but according to Pew Research, roughly half the Americans are in the middle class. Well, do you know that in 1971, middle class was made up of 61% of the Americans? And you know what? The upper class has not grown. So that tells you what's happened to that 11%. 11% have fallen out of the middle class. And why is that? Well, it could be any number of things. But the bottom line is that they have. And so that's something that we need to kind of keep in the back of our mind. The housing balloon popped in 2008 because of some bad practices. There was some government policy, there was practices, there were things that were going on, and there were a lot of bad loans out there. There were people that were having houses way beyond what they ever should have had, and so that was just a problem. And so when everything kind of fell apart, and a lot of people don't seem to remember or think about the fact that why did it fall apart? It fell apart because gas, remember, went up to about $4 a gallon. There were places it was about $5 a gallon. I remember it was nearly $5 a gallon for diesel. I have a diesel truck. I remember I didn't drive it a lot during that time. $5 a gallon for diesel is pretty pricey. So bottom line is that that changed everybody's behavior. When gas was so expensive, now they didn't have the money to go eat out. Well, now people aren't eating out and they aren't going on vacations. The hotels and the restaurants all of a sudden had to lay off people, and there was a domino. And so when suddenly a couple, three people couldn't, do their houses, and I say a couple, three, I mean a lot, obviously. When they couldn't pay for make their house payments, then they began losing their houses. And so this just dominoed and just went crazy. Well, recently there was a stress test done on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and that's by law. Every few years they've got to take a look at their situation and say, if there were an economic downturn, what could happen? And this recent stress test showed that the government bailout, which means you and I, could have to bail them out to the tune of $100 billion. Now, I realize that $100 billion is as much as it used to be, but it's still a lot of money. Families similar to the one I was talking about there in this analogy also use credit cards a lot. I read here a while back that the average person cannot, if an unexpected $400 expense came up, they wouldn't be able to pay it. They don't have the cash, and so what would they have to do? They'd put it on a credit card. Okay? Well, if you can't pay it and you put it on a credit card, that means you're not paying the credit card next month either. You're probably just going to make the minimum payment or make some kind of a payment on it. Consumer credit card debt is now over $1 trillion in this country. Capital One is one of the biggest credit card issuers in the country, and they have recently written off as much as 5% of their outstanding credit card loans. This is considered dangerous territory. Okay, so we're in a situation while you're listening to everything's glorious and the stock market's wonderful and unemployment's low. These are things that are going on today. Okay, I want you to understand that. What about student loans? NPR did a report here recently in May that 3,000 people a day default on their student loans. This adds up to an unpaid bill of $136 billion. This is supposed to be with a recovering and growing economy. Student loans right now total a staggering $1.4 trillion. So understand, this is another real problem. Now I've mentioned this next thing I've mentioned before. Cars. As cars get more expensive, auto loans are going for 6 and 7 years. Suddenly these become subprime auto loans. And then you add into that there's also auto loan fraud where somebody, the salesman puts down somebody that they know they don't make enough money to make payments to get the loan, so they put down, instead of making $30,000 a year, they put down that they make $60,000 a year to get them the car. They get the sale, they get their commission, out the door it goes. They don't care if the car gets repossessed down the road. So, and repossession is a different thing with cars now, because with GPS you can find the car wherever it is, and you can also turn it off. And so then when the repossession guy gets there, he turns it back on and drives it off. So what do? You've lost your car. One hiccup can put us over the edge. We are living in another stack of cards. And could it be the North Korea thing? Could it be, I don't know what it could be. There's any number of things that could cause this thing to fall over. And the bottom line is I'm out of time. The bottom line is that we got a situation here that could destroy us once again economically. It could be a lot worse than 2008. And I hope you'll pay attention and maybe a little introspective look in your life and how you're spending your money. God bless you, and I appreciate you coming and being with me. And it looks like we beat the rain. Thanks, everybody.